just ideally around the table conversation with some committee members who might have specific issues or questions they want to drill down into further, or programs that they had been spoken to about that were not in the budget they might want to have considered. So some members have presented some paperwork, and you folks are here. Is there anything that draws particular attention to any in the program that you would like to talk to?
Do you need some paperwork?
If you want to submit that paperwork, Chairman Day, we'll take it that way.
Last year in Pennsylvania, training.
Right.
It was training this year, and we participated all of our students. As I recall, the cost of the cost of training for that was around $275,000 a year for 3 years. Brother reference Bill Mann will give you the absolute number on that. That's what I remember training in my mind. And also on the thing, tracking sheet.
Right.
Perhaps I was not here with this on page 11. I'm curious as to why there were 10, 4, 12, 10, 4, 13, 10, 4, 14, 4% pay raises in these three positions.
I think that was the same that they had had in the past. And they asked for the 4% pay raise, but you know, 7% down to 3% on that. At their request. Their next raise is 4%.
Uniformity.
It does lack uniformity with the rest of the state departments, and in fact, I believe the elected positions have to reflect the average raise of the state. So that would be something like this year that you have raises. Several things in that we would also work on, just to Chairman Day. We'll realign some funds relative to 10-4-17. It currently reflects $362,000 in continuation. Pardon me, that the committee did not recommend in the 07 budget for the Cobb and Douglas Circus, since the judges couldn't be seated, so we'll take that money from there. We'll have to then add additional money of 10-4-7 and annualized funds for the new judgeship. We want to do some things around that, but it is still effectively fund the new judgeship should they come into play. Something else the committee should note is the 10-4-10. $1,500,000 was funded in the 07 budget, so that money will be able to come out of the OA request. That was what I recommended and adopted in the full appropriations committee. items that skipped our notice.
Yes, that was past the judicial.
No, so we're not going down the list. We're going at member discretion. So if you wish to page 5, the judicial council.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to indicate this earlier, maybe get some further information about the Office of Dispute Resolution. Particularly, I noticed they've asked for some new funding. Someone here can you and I talk about that or we can chat again.
Yes, I'll bring the director of that agency and come to see you.
If you can try to do that for the chairman, and we will be putting our recommendation together Wednesday. I know we'll be on the floor to ask if not to schedule these meetings tomorrow. Chairman Lawson, make time.
I'll get with him and get a time.
Please do that.
I will.
We'll gauge your progress. Anyone else have anything else? Chairman's tied up to for a second. Chairman Ward, Representative Powell, what we were just trying to go is make sure that we had not missed anything. I'll finish the description and go back to Chairman Ross, but if anything that had passed by the committee on the presentations that would be of interest that we should keep in mind, either for our recommendations to the full committee and or to bring door for possible consideration, or there was something in a continuation of the safeguard notice that you as a committee member would have additional information needs on Chairman Rawson just mentioned, also the dispute resolution and the district council. Chairman, if you had anything else you wanted to follow up on?
I think there was only so far. I have an interest in the state control of the what you have discussed.
Chairman Ward, did you have anything? President Powell, did you have anything further that you want to? I don't just need to sit there. We will be tied up. I didn't know that they were streaming our video here. I thought we were online, so we will start using the microphone. I apologize for those. I looked up at a little bit like anything. President Powell, asked now, did you have anything that you wanted to look at this point? What's our schedule? 10 now, there, right?
10. Have we already set a schedule for further deliberations?
They had just informed me we will be looking to try to get this document out, the budget, later this week, perhaps as early as Wednesday. I have set a late afternoon meeting Wednesday for the committee's consideration to vote that, to give us time should anything have come up today that we wanted to look at to add. And I know you're working with Chairman Chambers and Chairman Bernard on DOC information. Give plenty of time for that group, plenty of time such that it is on a rush schedule to do that. So we'll try to work through that tomorrow and early on Wednesday in preparation. I think a lot of the information that we have that we will be able to provide and complete. For instance, the annualizers, we're going to simply have to move forward at this time with the assumption that our recommendations will hold going through for our initial recommendations. We all know the way that works out in conference. And as 07 is put into concrete, we'll make those in final. But I think Mr. Parkinson and I have decided on the judicial council, that the only prudent manner in which to move forward would be to reflect our numbers. For instance, the salary increases from 4 to 3. The Senate could reinstate the 4, the Senate could go to 2, and as conference comes out, we'll adjust accordingly. But for our numbers, we'll use our recommendations which they were going to hold. Did anybody
have any further that they wish to address as to a program that they needed more information on? Again, I know this being some members of the committee, including myself, we're on this subcommittee. We'll do a lot of things to get back to the committee. We just have not had time. We want to start the process again, but we will do that. I know you had mentioned before, I don't know if you mentioned briefly, information you had thought might be of interest in the facility down in Middle Georgia. Do you want to spread that out here, or do you want to talk about that at a different time? No, let's go ahead.
One.
What we had been doing is just if committee members had information that they wanted to request for consideration, or if they needed more information as an individual committee member based on the presentation we had, now is the time to make sure we get the final answers as we bring forward a recommendation. So,
when the driver services building was expanded in Lawrence County, one of the biggest needs that we continue to hear from industry is the need to offer the issuance of CDL license. The county had given the land for the area, and it's an area where the county is willing to give a little more land if the facility could be paved in the position to issue CDL license. If you look at a map of where that's offered, there's really hardly any place. I think Albany, I think you had to then go as far as up to Milledgeville, and then the other places where the driver services have a facility where they could grant those. It's pretty, other than what's done through the technical college, there's not a place. So what we requested was from driver services what it would take to put it there. You're talking about a little more paving to the back lot of the existing facility and the positions to do that. What you're seeing, especially with the expansion at the port down there, is a growing demand for distribution centers. Fred's located in Dublin, as did Best Buy. You already had Farmers Furniture. You have some that are locating all around that region. And if you have the types of things that we anticipate with the biomass facility in Soperton, as you see what's developing through that corridor on I-16 for warehousing, especially from Chatham County on up, is simply the need for people who have taken that to be able to license or get their renewals and all they need for truck driving for the CDL license. So what I was asked to do to see if we could, what it would take is the county's willing to give the property. It would take asphalt to make the pad larger to hold the trucks, and the people to issue that. So I've got a sheet on it. I just called my office to bring it around. I'd given one to the chairman.
Right.
You may have one filed already, but you're not talking about a big expense. But this is an economic development issue for an area of the state, a pretty big area of the state, where there's really not a driver's services facility big enough to do that other than the one in Lawrence County.
Thank you. I know you had mentioned that before, and we have that in the book, and I appreciate you getting us another copy. We'll make sure the appropriate folks have it, and we can look at that as it goes into the Department of Driver Services.
About how many, what would the capacity be? I mean, in terms of licensure and all that, what type of processing do you see being filled?
Yes, we one of those areas of the state. It's gotten so busy with regular driver's license in Bibb County. People in the larger populated areas were coming down to Dublin to get their license for their regular driver's license. So this is an area that you really didn't have to have an appointment for because you could always get it. But the volume has picked up to where you now have an appointment even there
to get driver's license and any other kind because the volume's picked up. Truck drivers are now having to go to other places, and here you have the hubs where they service the trucks and the offerings of the tech school and diesel mechanics. All that is growing because the distribution center is going to locate in areas like ours in Middle Georgia, where you have the facilities available as well. You have these textile plants that are closed and left, and of course those are ideal for shifting over to distribution centers, and that's what's happening in a lot of the areas in Middle Georgia. But as far as the volume, it's gotten to the point where it's really, to be able to grow, you're going to need to offer this somewhere in Middle Georgia. And we're the only one that has a driver services facility large enough to where that could be done.
Thank you.
Mr. Porter, has the Department of Driver Services requested this, or is this just a local request?
Well, they have partnered. When they came down to open the office, this is what they had mentioned to me. I don't know that they asked the governor for the money as a priority, but economic development-wise, I think it would be a joint request.
So it's not necessarily a request from the department then?
That's correct. But, they've been reluctant to ask for a lot of the driver services improvements. A lot of the new buildings have been because counties were willing to give the property, and they've had to go where they were willing to give the land because most of these facilities are leased by the state, and they're only going where someone steps up and offers the land to do it. So it's kind of backwards on how we really ought to be doing this, but to meet the demand and need that's been out there. Excuse me.
How would you do that?
No, come in. It's had to be patched together the same way it was for the facility there, the same way for the one in Bibb County, the same way for the one in, I think, in Crawford County. I think there's one in this year's supplemental for the one down in Brunswick. It wasn't really a department request, but one because we've outgrown a lot of these outdated facilities. And they've come up. The department has come up with a model that, when they're able to work this out, architecturally is kind of the same now. So you don't have to reinvent it in every community, or every county doesn't have to front that money for that part. But most of these, you ask them, the counties to build them, and the state leases it from the county for the 20 years till it's paid off. Is how all these work.
We'll look at that and talk to the department as well.
We had further questions?
Are there further questions? Chairman Chambers, if you have any, the departments were specifically noted that they were not required to attend this afternoon. But if you have a question about anyone's budget, if you'd let us know, we'll try to line that up. Chairman Rawson mentioned, one particular area he'd like to get some information in. Ms. Nesbitt's going to get with him on that in the next day or so. I just wanted this to be, again, I wished it could have been in a room around a table, a bit of a sort of a work-through thing. I just wanted to give each one of the committee members, since this was the full year's budget, the opportunity. I know you're working with Representative Powell and Chairman Bernard on the DOC. That's the biggest number in our budget, and you guys are working with them, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that through the interim. They've been very good in the last couple of weeks in getting us some additional information. But did you have anything further that you'd like to request as we prepare the recommendations for full committee for later this week?
Pay raises for troopers and GBI agents.
We are looking at the information that we have for them and making our list, so to speak, to try to do that. Anything further?
Question I asked about the latitude of the chair and of the committee members, that in these, as we're trying to get something prepped, if we can look across all of these budgets to see where we might can determine some priorities, what would be the feeling of the chair and the committee members about trying to find possibly some money for some incentives on the pay grade, for public safety, for the commercial division over there, and GBI, possibly even looking at maybe a step that we've looked at over the years, including the maybe a step grade.
Well, I mean, that's if the committee, committee members have any ideas where we could find efficiencies and therefore, the dollars that go with them, we're most interested in that. I mean, we've had conversations over the last, well, actually this morning with many of the committee, many of the departments, because one of the things that they let us know as they made their presentations is they were not communicated with by OPB of the increase in the health care costs that would be associated or attributed to them from 16 to 22%. In some of the departments, that's a non-trivial number. So as we try to bring back to Chairman Harbin from each of our subcommittees a balanced budget, we're going to be severely limited in if we have to undertake the balancing with those numbers in mind. So we've endeavored to get with the departments and find out what those numbers are, and we're going to sort of go back to the chairman with an option A and an option B, because I fear if we didn't, those health care increases would probably substantially take up any savings that we might find. As a for instance, we have the one portion of the budget I mentioned earlier, we've funded $1.5 million out of the Superior Court budget from 08 to 07. So we have that money available to us now because of the savings we found in 07. We were able to pre-fund that. If you remember those needs, capital needs for security and courtrooms that don't have that, that's an important thing and a time-sensitive thing. So, but yes, if the committee members have any ideas of whereby we could identify savings that would help us get to the funds we need in order to present a pay raise for consideration to the full committee. I think we have to answer your question, I think we sort of have to pay our way to getting that for the public safety folks. Did that? Yes, ma'am. I was informed they are streaming this, so yes.
Yeah. As we started looking on our study committee, the subcommittee on the corrections department, it's going to take us probably some time over the summer to get a better grasp of the business model of some of these agencies, or the business practices, I guess I should say, of how they operate and how they come about in their decision-making process. And as we move forward with that, I'd like to see if we can get permission from Chairman Harbin to authorize some time for us to be able to go down and work with the staff there. The staff has been most willing. I do want to say that they contacted me last week. They have canceled the 4 $1 million limit credit cards in the Department of Corrections, so those cards are no longer operational, and they're going to get documentation to verify that to us shortly. But they have been so forthcoming, and they are so willing to show us how they work over there. I'd like to be able to take that study committee on through the summer and learn more about how they work. And with Chairman Bernard also chairing the state institutions and properties, I can certainly see where that would be beneficial to his committee as well.
That brings up a point I had mentioned last week, that we were going to try to have 3-person committees to work with agencies. I never got those out, and I'll explain why. As I looked around with the Judiciary Committee's meeting, and I know a number of you are on the Judiciary Committee, and we would not have been able to really activate those three-person working committees to look at these budgets. I intend to do that and hope they will do that in the interim. I know there's a bill coming over from the Senate, I think Senator Schaefer has, that somehow speaks to zero-based budgeting somewhere in our plan here in Georgia, and I don't know if that'll be adopted as a statute or not, but I would like our committee to take the go forward and look toward that, just in terms of not to pick on the Department of Corrections, except that they are the largest amount in our budget and have the most employees and the most buildings and things to maintain. But clearly, when you have $1 billion budget and at mid-year we're only looking at $15 million, there are things going on. There are moving parts in there that I think can be looked at every year. So I hope your group, along with Representative Powell and Chairman Bernard, would do that. I know, there are arguably questions that we haven't updated things within the Court of Appeals. So I mean, we may go and ask questions about the continuation budget and find out. We may find savings. We may find some things that, in order for them to do their job and to move cases through the docket quicker, they may actually need additional personnel or perhaps automation. So we're going to try to do that in the interim. And unfortunately, given our 40-day session and the time down here, and the nature that the budget had already been submitted by the time we were involved, we couldn't do that this year. But if we stay involved in the June, July, August time frame, it's still going to go through the process. The departments are still going to prepare their budget. They're going to go to the OPB and through the executive process. But at least we will know going in a little bit more than we did this year. Be more familiar with it. So I hope we can do that going forward. Are there further questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, on the Department of Corrections budget, on the 07 budget, you had recommended replacing some of the operating funds or fast-track bids with agency funds. Are you still in the same posture?
Well, I think in the document. I think in the document we adopted today, we actually replaced some of the money that we had asked them to use in reserves. I think specifically for the pre-release center. We didn't want to get the opening of that facility caught up in a question of was there enough reserves to cover, so that money was reinstated. We also reinstated the monies for the private prison CPI because, again, we didn't want to get caught up in a position where they couldn't pay a vendor or claim they couldn't pay a vendor because the money was not there while we continue to work. They've been real good in working with Chairman Chambers and Representative Powell and Chairman Bernard. I don't think at this point, while we're having that conversation, unless somebody feels the need to require additional funding from a reserve. Now, we need to look at each one of these numbers and find out, does that money need to be there this year? But I don't think anyone wants to slow down the fast-track expansions that we have in place, because I know in a separate matter there's legislation coming forward to actually for the state to pay the appropriate rate to counties that are housing state prisoners. So if we open these fast-track facilities, that saves us those dollars should that statute be updated and us pay the actual time.
Okay, thank you.
Again, what we were looking for within the Department of Corrections was to bring all the programs back into the budget. Those reserve monies had been used to pay for programs that are arguably needed, but need to compete for funds like the rest of the programs that do through the legislative process. And I think we have that on the right track. I'll look forward to Representative Powell and Chairman Chambers and Chairman Bernard talking to us further about that as we move forward. Anything further? Anything further? If not, we had been asked to not even attempt to schedule a committee or subcommittee meeting tomorrow. I think there is quite a substantial calendar already set, and there may even be some supplemental added to that. So it would not be the intention of the chair to meet as a committee on Tuesday. We have a meeting scheduled. Am I right, Janae? We're scheduled at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Okay, we're at 2 and 4. I think it's on my machine at 4, and that's one of those daylight savings time synchronization issues between the computer and my BlackBerry. But we are at 2 o'clock. We would possibly have some conversations in the morning if there are last-minute conversations that provide for that we find anything that's a substantive change or substantive new information relating to the pay raise that the committee needs to be made aware of. We'll try to do that, and I'll let you know on the floor tomorrow. But otherwise, our meeting will be at 2 o'clock on Wednesday. If there's no further business for the subcommittee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. Without objection.